There we go.
I did my job.
You did. You get your work here is done. So the way I planned today's training was to spend the first half hour or so really going through with you folks probably the most fundamental change that we'll have to make to our syllabi in principle between the spring semester and the fall semester, and that is going to be to our tracking calendars. We are moving away from the methodology column that you guys have all been very familiar with, and what we're attempting to do instead is to take the methodology column and basically break it into two separate pieces or two separate parts. The first piece is what the instructor does, you, in the classroom, and maybe also preparing for that as well. And then the other side of it is the students do. And this is you articulating to the students what they may have to do in preparation for class coming in, but it may also involve what they do during the class. It may also involve what the students are doing after class. Just a real quick historical perspective for you guys about why this column stayed in. This new tracking calendar, both these, and the new supplemental syllabus, both of these things came directly from FDC, and I sit on Systems FDC. One of our initial proposals when we were looking at the tracking calendar was to do away with that column completely. Our proposal was to simplify that syllabus as much as possible, and the one area that we felt that most often tended to sidetrack both instructors as well as students was that methodology column. It tended to get very academese in language. It may have also been something where instructors just felt like it was just something to, in a sense, fill in because the college required it. And we made that proposal to curriculum, and curriculum came back and said, that's fine. If you want to get rid of that column, you can do so. But what is going to probably end up happening when your courses come up for review, your faculty will have to supply lesson plans for every single class meeting. Do you want to do lesson plans that can be submitted to systems for every single one of your class meetings? The looks on your faces say it all. So what we recognized was leaving that column in was important. This was around the time that through curriculum, career life prep and the beta testing of the new courses, a couple faculty members had actually created these columns to really be able to show that 90% instructor-led and instructor-supported. And after FDC talked about it further, we made the decision to leave the column in, but to split the column in half. I will tell you guys, I did this actually this semester, knowing we were going down this path. I actually used these two new columns in my SOC 225 and COM 104 courses that I'm teaching. And it gave me pause, because I found myself at times when I was doing my supplemental coming into winter, where I may have ordinarily had the students do X and Y, and I realized that that was not 90% instructor supported. It really gave me pause to rethink my own practice. So the first part of today's training is going to really get you folks to think through the tracking calendar. The new tracking calendar is going to look like this. This is where we're going to break down our classes by week. Once we get through the week, we're going to get into breaking them down by the class day and by the class date. This is all stuff that you should be familiar with. The next thing over is going to be the topics to be covered. Now, Rick and I have been preaching this since we've had new faculty orientation. Some of you were hired here since we've had new faculty orientation, so you've heard this before. Others of you were hired before we put that process into place. And you may not have heard this maybe as frequently or as assertively as what Rick and I say. This topic to be covered column should not be a chapter the students are reading in the textbook. You should not be pulling chapter 2, title of the chapter is this. These topics to be covered really should be authentic descriptions of what you are going to fundamentally cover in your class meeting. They should not just simply be re-representations of chapters that tie back into the course. You can do that more so on this assignments and this assessments column that's more over to the far right-hand side. I know, Rick, you and I have talked about this in the past. Do you want to add anything more to that besides what I've just said?
Not this one. Okay.
Let's move from the left-hand side over to the right-hand side. Again, a column that you guys should be familiar with is the course outcomes. And that are this will be the outcomes that we plan on addressing. A common error that we've seen doing supplemental syllabus reviews over the years is where faculty members have made the decision to just dump all the course outcomes in and say, well, either directly or indirectly, I'm doing them all anyway, so I might as well put them in there. Please, the fact that we're changing the supplemental plus the tracking calendar is really a great opportunity for us to rethink our process. really rethink fundamentally what we do class over class. And so while there are areas of this tracking calendar and the new supplemental where we could probably go ahead and do like a copy and paste job, I would really encourage you to get away from the copy and paste and to really look at a brand new design and a brand new approach to your courses. Maybe use what you've done in the past as a model or as a starting place, but to really look at how you guys can reinvent what you're doing. The sample that we got from systems does show how they not only pulled the course outcome number over, but also dropped in the actual course outcome from the system syllabus for the course. You're not necessarily required to do that, but I think Rick and I can both tell you that the practice there is your students are able to see not just simply a number that they may have no meaning to them whatsoever, but they're actually able to see a description of what that course outcome is. It may make them more aware of it, and fundamentally what it may make us as instructors is also more aware. Remember, we're an outcomes-based institution. Our classes and our lesson plans should be fundamentally driven by the course outcome or outcomes that we plan to cover in that class meeting. They should not be based upon our favorite lessons that have absolutely no relationship whatsoever to what we're teaching. So again, this practice may very much make us more aware to make sure we're plugging in things that tie back into our lesson. We're going to come back to these two middle columns in a second because that's going to be part of where we're going to go. The next item over would be the assignments as well as the assessments column. This is where you have, over the past, put in things like things the students should read prior to class, homework that you guys plan on maybe giving in class, that class meeting, and then maybe giving a due date that goes along with it. The date when it's going to be due coming into the class meeting, or if I'm giving that assignment in class that date, the date that I anticipate the students having to turn it in.
Chris?
Yes?
Just thinking back to the course outcomes, if I'm correct, it's all happening so fast, so I may be incorrect. The course outcomes are no longer in the supplemental syllabus, right? They're just a link to the catalog.
No, that's the program outcomes.
I don't see the course outcomes in there. Well, anyway. It's still, the fact is once you go through that supplemental syllabus, students tend not to look back at that.
Exactly.
Or look at the system syllabus. So it makes a lot of sense to have those course outcomes because that's what they're going to be looking at here to be directing them week by week. Very
well said. And to Rick's point also, and we say this to new faculty as well during orientation, and I say this to my students on day one. The supplemental is important, and they may have to go back to it from time to time to look at the breakdown of grades, processes, procedures, policies with the course, and all of that. But I tell my students this, that tracking calendar, day in and day out, really is their Bible. That is the most important document that they're going to look at probably class meeting to class meeting.
Yeah, I'm looking at this thing, this handout here.
Yep.
And there's no course outcome on it.
Okay,
No.
so
Where should it be?
we will double check it, but then if it's not there, then I think the reason why they're not listed there is that because we're going to represent them on the tracking calendar. But and Juan and I actually Juan and I actually went through this document before it was sent out, and so if it's not listed there, then it's not required in the supplemental. It's required though in the tracking calendar, probably for that reason. So we avoid duplication.
So instead of having it listed and then coming down here and put CO1 and
Yep.
listing it out again,
Yep.
we're not going to do that. We're not going to list it at top, but we're going to put it in each and every week
Yes.
of what we're going to be doing.
Yes. Yes. And look, thinking back on how we argue this with FTC, I believe that that's how we positioned it. That doesn't mean, by the way, that you can't take the course outcomes and list them on that tracking calendar, maybe at the bottom, at the very end, your last page. You can do that if you wanted to show them comprehensively in one place.
Good idea.
But Juan and I went through that document, I think, 3 times in new directions to make sure that the template matched it. The fact that they're not there, that's what I would argue.
We have too many course outcomes, so the explanation for each line will be huge, and it'll cause more paper. Can't we just do CO2 and then?
If you're going to put the list of outcomes somewhere in the tracking calendar, like maybe on the last page at the bottom, or maybe at the top in a table above it,
Right.
then I guess it would be okay. But I would also go back to my earlier point too. If you're listing more than probably 2 to 3 course outcomes for that class meeting, chances are you're actually not hitting all 3 of those outcomes.
But if it's a full week, you meet twice a week, one day is,
Correct, but remember, this is a block right here. So this is 928, this is 10.3. These just happen to be duplicated. Course outcome 2 here and course outcome 2 here. If this instructor is doing course outcome 2 here and course outcome 3 here, you see what I'm saying? But if you're doing more than 3 outcomes in a class meeting, and not in a week, but in a class meeting, chances are I would go really back and check your practice. Because chances are you're not hammering home 3 outcomes or more in one class meeting.
That
would take a lot.
As I see, resonate a little bit.
Yeah.
It sounds like they want us to include the reference to the course outcomes in the instructor's approach to the course. How are you going to teach it to meet these outcomes? Now, it doesn't say you have to list the course outcomes. The guide says, provide a statement to acquaint students with the instructor's approach to instruction for an assessment of students' acquisition,
Yes.
knowledge, skills, and behaviors to meet course outcomes.
Yes.
So,
But it doesn't mean that we're necessarily even saying you're going to do course outcome 3 by blah, 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 blah.
no.
And that's why, to Rick's point, I would encourage you when you guys start writing your supplementals, have the guide in one hand, and then have the template or on the computer screen in the other. That way you're kind of bouncing back and forth between the two. All right. You're going to ask a question, Paul?
Well, okay, so this is the Bible for the students.
Yes.
And I'm on board with that.
Yes.
There is, by design, no reference to the chapter that you're going through.
You can put it right here.
Okay,
Under your assignments and
so
assessments.
next week we'll be dealing, okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
You just don't want it in the topics.
Oh, yeah. We don't want it in the topics.
Okay.
But we could definitely put it in under those assignments
Okay.
and assessments.
All
It's a great question. Yeah, that doesn't mean we're doing away with it altogether, but what we see through course review all the time are instances where faculty members are literally pulling, this week we're covering chapter 2.
Yeah.
All right, well, maybe it's not the entirety of chapter 2. Maybe there's portions of chapter 2 that you're actually doing, but what that communicates both to the student as well as to the college is that the textbook is driving the course. And that's not what we want.
Whether you're writing theories and concepts in a cover as opposed to chapter.
Exactly. Other questions so far? Okay. And again, we're going to spend the next probably 15 minutes or so talking more about the role and support and the student expectations. So just as a reminder, and this is part of the CLP effort, Career Life Prep, we have tried to fundamentally reconceptualize our courses. And for those of you that were at the faculty training event about a month ago, Charity and Bill both spoke to this. If you've taught the CLP courses, the 100 level first term courses at 90% instructor supported should not be a surprise to you. This is how we've been operating for almost the last year. Where there has been a lot of discussion, and FDC talked about it, the deans have talked about it, how do you start separating 90% instructor supported to 80% instructor supported, 70%. When you get to the 200 level, 60% and 70%. When you get to the 300 level, 50 and 60. And then by the time the students get to the 400 level, 40% and 50%. And that's where we're going to spend some time today. If you're teaching first term courses, great. You probably have been practicing this, and quite frankly, I think for Rick and I, 90% has always been relatively easy to think through because it's probably a relatively traditional part of the teaching model. I'm going to show it, I'm going to lecture to it, I'm going to talk about it, I'm going to guide you through the process. I'm looking at Manzor in the back with math. I'll throw the problem up on the whiteboard, and we will walk step by step through the problem together. And then after that, I'll throw another problem at you, and then you'll do it while I circulate throughout the room. That's very much 90% instructor supported. Whereas maybe we get down to 40 and 50% instructor supported, we were throwing the problem up on the board, maybe listing a bunch of the procedures over here and telling the students, okay, try to figure it out. And I'll come around and help you out. That's having the instructor support in half. But we don't want to get into a situation, and Rick and I were just talking about this with the blended model that's coming down the pike. We don't want to get into a situation where we're shifting to traditional classroom methodologies where it's 90%, 80%, 70, 60, 50, 40 doesn't dictate the amount of time that you're lecturing. That's not the intention here. And that's not how you guys should conceptualize this. Well, it means 100 level first term courses, I'm lecturing 90% of the time and they're working by themselves 10% of the time. That's not the intention. and then just kind of work your way down through the process, the percentages. What it comes down to is something that's more comprehensive. It's not just simply where we're leading the class, but it is also where we are supporting the class. And we're going to talk through and going to give you a chance to really conceptualize all of that. And this really comes down to the level of scaffolding that we give. We can start thinking through the percentages of what we're doing, tied not only to how we're leading the class, but in a sense also how we're scaffolding the course. If it's a 90, 80%, 70% instructor-supported classroom, the expectation is that we're taking big projects, big challenging concepts, and we're breaking them down into much smaller, more manageable chunks that the students can consume, make sense of, integrate, find some meaning into, and then be able to do it themselves. And as the students move into 300, 400 level courses, those chunks are probably much larger. I liken this to feeding a baby versus feeding a teenager. Babies need much smaller chunks full of food. Teenagers, usually, I'm looking at Mr. Savasta over here, probably take the entire thing in one whole chunk. But of course, anything that's not, that's not steak related, right, Paul?
That's right.
Exactly. I think that's the way that you guys can consider this and think about that. How we divide it up into smaller pieces for our first and second term students, larger pieces for our upper division students. So our methods really are where we're taking a look at a large final assessment. If you look at what we did with the career life prep initiatives in the 100 level courses, and Deb can speak to this and Alex as well, because 3 of us were on the realignment team, we use reverse course design. For those of you in the room that don't have CLP courses, reverse course design basically means this. You build a major assessment or assessments into your course, and when you think about your instruction, it's designed to support what they have to do in each one of these major assessments. It doesn't mean that you're teaching to the test or you're teaching to the assessment. But what you recognize is that your instruction is being fundamentally informed, assessed, and evaluated based upon how the students do on those assignments that you've created for the students. If it's a 100 level course, like I'm thinking with Lou with your accounting courses, if you're expecting the students at the end of the course to put together some sort of a major ledger of some sort, and it's going to involve, let's say, 25 entries, then maybe in the old days we would give them instruction that would help them create and complete the 25 entries, but they did those at the end of the semester. Whereas under this model, there's that major assessment, but the smaller formative assessments are maybe where they do 5 entries here, they get some feedback from you. They do 5 entries here, they get some feedback from you. They do 5 entries here, they get some feedback from you. And as the semester gets to the end, they start taking the smaller pieces and they start putting these things together. And this is also stuff that we want to represent within our methodologies. The reason why I'm starting here with you guys at the conceptual level is because what I'm talking about right now can help you to not only conceptualize what the students do, but also what you're doing as the instructors. This is going to really help you fill in both of those columns. The instructor is going to do this, and the students are going to do this. Whether it's before class, during class, or after class, even the instructor does could be before class, during class, and after class. One of the things that you can include under your instructor does when they have these smaller assignment points, you could put in there, instructor will read through what the students do and provide feedback. That's going to signal to you and to the students that there's going to be some feedback provided based upon the work that they've already performed. So again, this is going to really give us a chance to think more comprehensively about our classrooms and what we do. So here's what I want you guys to do. We're going to have a brief activity with this. I want you to think about a course that you were assigned to for spring 2017. If you don't necessarily know all your course assignments yet, if you want to think about a course you're teaching now, that's totally fine. And I want you guys to briefly outline your major assessment. Just bullet point it. What is it? Describe it. Take a few moments to do that. And then I want you to think about how you can break it up, knowing that you're teaching either in a 90%, 80%, 70% classroom based upon the level. First term, 100, 200, 300, 400 level course. So take a few moments to do that. What is the assessment? Describe it. And then think about how you can chunk it down into smaller pieces over the course of that entire semester. And then we'll see what you guys can come up with.
what I mean from the guide. Here's what you can expect in this course.
Yeah.
So those would come right from program outcomes. You see, wouldn't it?
Yeah. Which is, well, no, it's okay, because that's when you have right here, and you're looking at the screen. The template was not set up. And I think we were purposeful in doing that. I didn't want to take the explanations and just pop them in and say, but that's where you're going to have to do both of these next to each other.
It would have been a lot. It would have been a lot. This was the feedback I gave her. I still think it would have been a lot easier for
Yeah.
them to see. This was like we do a description of the course.
Yeah.
You put the outcomes in there. You cut down so much.
Yeah, exactly.
Tracking calendar, we're suggesting that you put them in.
Exactly. That might be a better way for us to set it up.
Yeah. No, I think this is good for your six. This is like that. Yeah. Now, here's the thing they're going to ask in terms of that presentation. They're not going to have to start from scratch because they're starting the course another week.
Yeah.
How do we facilitate them getting stuff from people that have already?
Well, I think that's where the deans come in. If we find out that, if we can find out who they are and where they're going to be able to teach them, maybe we can send them the documents ahead of time and flip the training. Maybe we
It's a lot of work. You, in your little part, you do this in your orientation.
Meaning John Ivory or running a Buffalo. He worked for the Buffalo for Delta, so he didn't go through a full learning process. And then it depends on how many the two full-time positions. You know, if somebody who's internal.
Okay, yeah, but I mean, I'm talking about normal cadre. You would do that during the orientation.
Yeah, I give them everything during the program orientation.
Yeah, Chris.
Yeah,
Well, it's only also like the major one, the fundamental courses. There are no one particular final assessment.
Correct, but there are major assessments. And so what those, and this is where some of the program areas have already shown struggles. And we saw that. I was at course review back in a couple months ago, and we still have some 100 level program area courses that are not scaffolding, that are requiring things that lie outside of the is and is not documents. So you're right. And we're going to get more into that relative to the feedback. I've got some statistics to show to you guys that show you the differences between the CLP first term courses versus what's happening in the non-CLP courses. But you're right. If somebody is giving a larger, let's say a midterm major assessment and a mid-major end of term assessment, it is going to be that program area faculty member's responsibility to chunk this stuff down. About 30 seconds, folks.
All the courses, I'm missing my INFP quiz this spring. Did they not get loaded again?
Possibly.
Okay.
Because I think everything is in there in the banner, into Blackboard or Banner. So.
Okay, because I have my com in the English ones, but not the INFP.
I can find out for you.
Okay. So maybe you took it away.
Nope. Lou, do you have a question?
I'm going to wait and see if it's answered.
Okay. So does anybody want to share? What's your major assessment, and then how would you break it up into smaller pieces?
I have a course called Sales and Building Relationships.
Okay.
And I've been bequeathed several projects, from other syllabi, but they have nothing to do with sales. They have to do with marketing.
Okay.
And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to build my special project around. You're a sales manager, and you're going to be working for a local manufacturing company from the Buffalo Niagara Manufacturers List.
Great.
You're going to train 4 sales people. And as you go through the first 3 or 4, chapters that we'll go through, the assessment will be, now, how are you going to train your salespeople in these areas for your business and your industry.
Excellent.
And then we just keep building on that. And then at the end, I'll have them take all of them and put them together and make a presentation on, I'm the sales manager of this company, and I've hired these 4 people, and I'll take you through what we did to train them to build relationships in sales.
That's excellent. And what I also like about that is it ties into the whole authentic assessment element of what we're trying to do. Put them into workplace-related situations, take the learning from the course, and then be able to apply them. That's a great example. Chunking things down into smaller pieces, giving them regular feedback, and that regular feedback then can inform what that final product looks like. Great.
But I'm confused.
Go ahead.
Because then I move into my accounting class.
Yes.
Where accounting is, today we're going to learn how to do journal entries.
Yep.
And then the next class will be how to do a reconciliation or petty cash or this or that. You know, it doesn't flow. It's learning different things one at a time. Now in the text, they take a company from the XYZ.
Yeah.
And then for each chapter, they have a problem for company XYZ.
Yeah.
Which for some reason, maybe because it's company XYZ and you feel comfortable with that name, but you just do little chunks every time. And you can't really pull those chunks into something because financial statements are before a lot of the other stuff.
Sure. That may be where there's an opportunity for you to, the textbook I think is already chunking things down for you. Where your opportunity might be, and this is maybe your contribution, and maybe it's something they do at the midterm point, maybe it's something they do at the end of the term, where they think comprehensively. And this is synthesis. Let's go to Bloom's taxonomy. This is the synthesis level thinking. I have these 3 or 4 smaller things that you've done. Like you said, they've been kind of compartmentalized. Now let's take a stop. Let's pause for a second. Think about what we've done, and let's think about how those tie into that financial statement that really is supposed to pull all of this stuff together and give you a comprehensive vision of what that company looks like. Does that make sense?
Yeah. The question being, after this series of chunks, how do you relate this to the financial statements?
Exactly. And maybe what that means is you show them a sample financial statement. This is what a financial statement looks like. Now, how have what you've done, how does it actually inform what that financial statement looks like? Wow, it actually sounds like I know this stuff.
Oh, you're just winging it, man. Anybody who knows anything about it is just knows you're doing it. But that's okay. By the way, I have a question.
Go ahead, Paul.
Okay, I'm
Angelina,
sorry.
I got you too.
I like doing research papers at the 200, 300 level, econ level. So if I do something on I like doing it on either recession or some, whatever.
Yeah.
I like it on the recession. So if I have a number of questions that I want answered in that research paper.
Yes.
Would it fit that, all right, if I'm going to talk about the housing market, take one of the chapters out of the book, and maybe if I have to bring it from chapter 9 all the way to early in the semester, talk about that, and then talk about any type of fiscal spending that's part of the research paper as well. If I do that in chunks, would that fit?
Absolutely. And if you're worried that there's too much 90% in that because you're giving them the questions, you're giving them the readings, because it's a 200 level course, right?
Right.
So where you could start to introduce the 60, 70% and say, I'm giving you 2 research questions, and Rick, tell me if you agree with me on this. I'm giving you 2 research questions. I'm going to ask you to come up with a 3rd, or maybe come up with a 4th. Because now what you're doing is you're forcing them to work a little bit more independently than what they would have maybe in that 100 level version of the course.
Okay.
Would you agree with that?
Yeah, remember too, that you can't quantify this 90-80.
Right.
Yeah.
It's more, if you think in terms of the scaffold, you think in terms of, and what the college is trying to get teachers to do, which we don't do, is to think in portions, like portion, you talked about it's like portion control.
Yeah.
Because what we see is that people don't really change the amount of support they give. You know, and we've been giving like marketing plans, business plans, and 100 level courses.
Right.
And we wonder why we're losing the students.
Yeah.
But we want them by 200, 300 to be able to do that.
Yeah.
So you've got to scaffold it.
Yeah. I like the portion control example because clearly I have no idea about portion control. Jillian and then me and Zor, go ahead.
Yeah, for 100 and 200 level courses that you had, I have decided to pick up we have the quantitative and, design for reading project. That integrates quite a bit of mathematical concepts. So that I take as the final assessment. There's a lot of involvement of algebra in this, consumer math in it. You have to do some little research also under the department, labor departments and all that. And then once the integrated is kind of complete a loop. So, what the thesis begins with and what the conclusions are. So it kind of fosters a different level of education.
Yep. And when you're supplying them with some of the resources, plus you're also chunking it down to not only quantitative reasoning, but also the scientific method.
Yes, I remember.
You're getting them to walk through the process. Then similarly, you're at 90%.
I have one question that is concerned with students. They don't want to share their loans here. And there are some students like the veterans who don't at all pay an education loan and how to start it. So I just want to talk about that maybe too.
Yeah, we have an offline conversation about it, but if it's a matter where they don't want to talk about it, you can always create a hypothetical for them.
Yeah,
and
but
put them in that
there
situation.
be a lot of hypothetical things and that would create hypothetical here, and that's add up, that's the problem.
But they could create a hypothetical person who's got X number of dollars that they're in debt and then go from there.
Yeah, well, that's a bit out there, but
we could talk about it. Jillian, I'm sorry.
I've been teaching COM 104 for a couple times now, and in assessment 3, problem solving process, it always seems like the beginning, going through the process, I seem to have a moment where the students are like, what does this have to do with me? And so I just have been looking for ways to hook them with the workplace and them with the problem solving process. They can see it more in their personal lives, but not so much with how it relates to the workplace. So I plan on going back to the assessment and adding in questions that relate directly to, relating this right back to your major or to your workplace in the beginning when we're going over it, so that they answer these questions as we're going over each stage. And then we go into the practice problem stories, then we go into the group project. So right from the bat, even if we go into a group project, they have some sort of connection to, I somehow will use this in the workplace.
Very well said. And I think to Jillian's point also, I think sometimes in the CLP courses we feel like so much has been given to us.
Right.
We shouldn't supplement, add more. But I think to your point, maybe if students are struggling seeing the connection, maybe that's where we give them the chance to hop on the machine, or even maybe we come in with, you're in accounting. Here are some common workplace problems that accountants have to deal with. You're in business. If you're in CJ, here are some common workplace problems that you have to deal with. So give them kind of the scenario and say, look, you're not limited to this. You want to bring in other ones, you can. But again, that may also help us to reinforce the 90%.
Right.
Well said. Okay, good. So let's move from that perspective into formative and summative assessments. Again, Rick and I talk a lot about this during the course review process, during the new faculty orientation process. The last course review, once again, we saw a lot of great examples of summative assessments, but again, back to this 90, 80, 70, 60%. Also, the frequency by which we give feedback. How can we, and you've already identified your major summative assessment. Paul talked about a research paper. Lou, you talked about that ledger project that the students are working through. So those are major end-of-term assessments. What we also should think about is not only those summative major assessments at the end that measure learning, that we use to evaluate to certify a grade or a score that ends up in the grade book, but we can also think about is the formative, smaller type of assessments. And by the way, and I had a conversation with online about this today. I'm teaching English 202 for the first time, and Kim Baker and I were talking about our first attempt through it. I have the students doing a number of writing tasks throughout the course of this online version of English 202. I'm giving them a ton of feedback for what they're turning in. In some instances, they're mini essays, but they're getting full credit. I'm not taking 5 points off here and 10 points off there because it's not an APA format or it's missing grammatical and mechanical errors. They're getting full credit for doing the work, but then I'm also feeding back in the feedback to tell them as they move from this smaller portion of the project to the big one, you need to put it in an APA format. You need to make sure that you copy edit what you're doing a little bit better than what you've already been doing. So similarly, think about these assessments and think about how you can use formative assessments. And I'm telling you guys I give them full credit. That doesn't mean that you have to. That's just an example of it. But remember, formative assessments are more so there for us to be able to provide feedback to improve the teaching and the learning experience. Primary tool that we can use to show how we're varying that percentage of instructor support. Rick, I know, strongly endorses when he does faculty coaching visits, the idea of that ticket out the door. How much can that ticket out the door be a formative assessment where you are giving feedback to your students? So,
Ticket out the door?
ticket out the door. Ever heard of a ticket out the door?
No.
Paul will talk.
Well, I look forward to that. Okay.
Well, it's got nothing to do with scalping tickets.
No, I knew it was some kind of academic thing, so, you know.
Maybe.
Okay.
More so, the students are giving you something as they're leaving the room that show what they've learned throughout the course of the week.
Oh,
And it's giving you a chance to provide some feedback.
Okay.
Maybe also some credit, too, for the fact they were there, they contributed to the work. So similar.
Play with their cell phone.
well, they're not gonna do that like that.
So similarly, go back, look at your course, look at your major assessments, and I want you guys to take about the next 2 minutes or so and think about some formative assessments that you could give into your class that either feed into those major assessments or that you could use in terms of giving you a chance to find out what the students are fundamentally learning in that class meeting. Take a few minutes, jot some thoughts down. What are some formative level assessments that you could give in your class to be able to assess and find out where your students are at? Take a few minutes and jot some thoughts down. The only other question I'm going to ask you at the end of this is, between all the different levels of support, what have I been giving you guys since you started doing this?
Well, typically, whenever management gets been doing anything, they typically don't do it. They typically don't do what they ask others to do. So.
Typically. Is that what I'm doing right now?
No, typically this is good. This is good. This is like 60%.
You get 60?
Huh?
You get 60?
Yeah.
Okay. Good question for the end. Give me a chance to reflect on it.
Well, Rick brought up a point. It's hard to quantify the percentages.
Oh, like Rick
Unless
said.
there's a calculation of some sort. That's what I like.
It's actually up here.
As we're going
I'm
along.
plugging it as we speak.
Gonna pop up some percentage at the end.
About 30 seconds, folks. Okay, so Andy, if it's okay, I'm going to pick on you first. What do you think? What are some formative assessments that you can give into your class?
Well, so the one I was writing down was I was thinking about comma usage. And one of the things I was thinking about doing is having them kind of look at sample sentences, fix them, like the different ways you can use commas, combining two independent clauses, conjunction. So not only putting commas where they need to be on someone else's sentences, and then maybe rewriting them in different ways. But I would also have them write maybe like a 5 to 6 sentence response. Because what I found is a lot of students often know how to correct someone else's work.
Well said.
But it's really hard for them to put that into practice in their own writing.
Well
so
said.
Then, having them craft that response and then I would kind of guide them through their response and say like, oh, see, this is where, just like in this example, you didn't put this comment here.
Well said. So you're in a sense, you're modeling for them on the front end when they're learning the essentials of common usage. They're going through and they're actually demonstrating it through somebody else's editing process. And then you're helping them, guiding them to be able to assess their own writing in the process.
Yeah.
And again, what you have there are skills that are building a sense upon each other.
Mhm.
Very well said.
Yeah.
Paul, what are you thinking?
Well, I think back on the in-class activities that I do, especially in the econ and business classes where there's some kind of either, calculating something, whether it's unemployment or looking at a graph and analyzing a graph. So I do it. And then I do in-class activities. All right, let's try these on our own. And then I walk around the room for the feedback there. And that's based typically on what they're going to have for homework and tested on.
Very well said. And I'm going to go back to something you brought up earlier also, which is the idea of the research assignments.
Right.
One way at the 100 level that you can really do this formative assessment approach is, let's say that you're requiring them to bring in 3 or 4 sources. And even if you're giving them the sources, you could ask them, summarize, evaluate, and reflect on how you may use this source in the context of that paper or the project that they're doing at the end of the semester.
Okay.
You're giving them feedback. You're having them start to build smaller pieces of their research that may build them into the large piece, which is what they submit at the end of the semester.
Okay.
So similarly, Ed, what are you thinking?
I typically now have, and I'm very comfortable with psychology and what we used to call sociology, what I learned is sociology. I don't know why we use this term sociology for now, but it's not what I learned.
Yeah.
But in those, I have large homework assignments, or not large, but one-page homework assignments several times during the semester.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, I use that to prompt reading, prompt preparation, prompt getting ready for class. Perhaps in this concept, using a smaller sort of thing where they just write a paragraph before every class.
Yes.
And then discuss that as they come in every day, because the whole idea is to prepare, to be able to participate and maybe make those smaller assignments so that they're ready to talk and force them to talk every day as they want.
That is excellent. And let me build on one of the really great best practice that Ed's given us. Again, let's go back to students do and instructor does. You're assigning the students to read 12 pages out of the textbook. In the past, and Rick and I talk about this all the time during orientation, don't just simply assign reads to the students and say, okay, just read it and then come to class prepared to discuss. They may not know how to extract the information that we want them to pay attention to. So to Ed's point, let's talk about instructor does, students do. The instructor will supply the students with questions that they need to complete as part of the reading assignment for the next class. The students read the assigned pages and complete the questions prior to coming to class. Once again, you've got 2 items that you can put into those columns. It reminds you what you need to supply to them, but what it also does is it reminds the students that they're going to have to do this as part of their class preparation for the next incoming class meeting. So you've already got some methodology right there that you'll be able to put in within both columns. Excellent point. Go ahead.
So you send them out of the class to the next class with some small formative assessment.
Yes.
They come in and they hand it in and you grade it and you put it in the blackboard?
Yeah, and by the way, to your point, Lou, and then this is where sometimes instructors get a little bit twitchy because they're like, and I'll show you the feedback loops that we have in the first term courses in a second, but the perspective might be, well, if I'm giving them 1 for each class, that's 30 class meetings, it's 30 more papers I have to grade. Not necessarily. They turn that work into you drop your eye over it, and it appeared that they were sober when they were doing most of it, and they gave a good-hearted effort towards it. I remember I'm being recorded here. Anyway, get back to systems in some way. But you see that they made a good-hearted effort. You don't have to put a score of 0 to 100 on it. You can give them 5 points because they did it, they made a good-hearted effort at it, and just by dropping your eye over it, there's some data that's there that helps you to understand what they got, what they didn't get, and that may give you some insight on how you prepare for the next upcoming lessons. You don't always think about you have to grade every single word of every single thing that those students submit to you. Sometimes it's enough that they turn it into you, they get credit for the attempt. And keep in mind also, that supports the idea of that low-stakes assessment. This is not about an I got you. This is about I want you to do it, and I want to give you some credit for actually having done it before you come into class. So absolutely, you can definitely do that.
So you're going to have to record an assessment for every student, for every class.
But I mean, and I do this. Rick knows, he's seen me in class a ton of times. My students usually have between 24 to 28 cats over the course of a semester. And those cats, whether they're done outside of class or inside of class, are quick writing tasks. They turn them into me. It's the ticket out the door concept. And I drop my eye over the weekends. It takes me 5 minutes. I put the grades on them, and those grades go into the grade book. It's a small percent of the grade, like 10 to 15%, and they're worth 1% or 0.5% each.
It takes as much time for the test.
To grade the test?
Well, the test may take longer to grade, but you still have to sit down and go to the end of the blackboard and into.
But keep in mind that when you're doing that, you're still giving your students feedback. You're giving them a sense of where they stand academically.
It is really pretty easy to do that when it is the formative assessment, because it's not like, oh, I'm on Dan, I gotta make sure he only got 90 and Sally got 50 or whatever. It's the same grade for everyone unless they didn't participate in the camp. So it's either you get the credit or you don't.
And if you give multiple low-stakes formative assessments, you can always tell them right up front that, or even if they don't tell them, you're going to drop a couple for the ends in life that get in the way.
Yep.
So it gives the flexibility if students don't have it in. It also promotes attendance.
Yes, because you can literally use that as something where you're not here. And I had this conversation with my students this week because I gave them their week 13, week 14 reports. I said, look, you weren't here for one of these cats, you can't make it up. Now, I put a safety net in with some extra credit in case they have some huge issues. But bottom line, you're not there, you don't get credit for it. Right? It's just that simple.
So if you have a course like COM 104 and it's already designed where it's weighted,
It's your 10%.
It's okay. That's the question.
Yeah, that is your 10% right there. You can use that 10% to build that into your assessments. And I want to go back to your comment also, because take a look at this design, and even just from a historical standpoint, when I was in my teaching infancy here, when I was interviewing for the general education program director position years ago, somebody handed me a copy of the college's teaching and learning guide and said, you really should read up on this before you apply for this position. And I remember looking at the title and thinking, teaching and learning guide. I just call it teaching guide. Why the hell did you put the word learning in there? This doesn't make any sort of sense whatsoever. I'm a teacher, I'm not a learner. I thought that, I didn't say it. I thought it, I didn't say it. It's an important point to put in there. If you're listening on the recording, I didn't. But as time's gone on, and this is the value, Rick and I constantly bouncing ideas off of each other. These two things complement each other, but these things don't always necessarily work in concert. We could come into a class and believe that we're on our A game one day. We're cracking good jokes. We're making good connections. We sound good. Our voices sound strong. There's a rhythm. There's a beat to our presentation. We're doing a phenomenal job that day teaching. There is no guarantee that your students are learning a damn thing. And really, the only way that we can find out what they truly know is by assessing them. You're teaching them, you want to ensure that they're learning, we've got to go back and take a look and see what they're fundamentally able to produce. And it doesn't mean that the assessment has to tie back into a 190, 80, 70, 60. You're assessing by looking at what, just like Debbie said, looking at what was there, and I got a chance to really quickly get a general sense of where the students are at, and now they're receiving full credit for completing it in class or out of class as a formative assessment. Go ahead.
So then why don't you tie Banner into the Blackboard, so when we put this daily assessment in, it automatically knows that the student was there?
It is. All your academic advisors now have access to this thing called Blackboard Analytics. And what that allows the advisors to do anytime that they want to. I know Buffalo especially is very active in using this, as is Amherst here. The advisors can go in. They have access to your grade books through analytics. They're able to pull out a list of every single one of your students. They're able to see their current average as Blackboard's reporting it in your course. So they do have it.
And you still have to go to Banner and put in attendance.
Correct.
Okay, that's another discussion.
But
I mean, come on.
I mean,
it's really not that difficult.
Well, it's a duplication.
Okay.
If we're gonna say, you hand this assessment in, and you fill it out reasonably well, I'm gonna give you a grade. So I go into Blackboard and give them the grade, because they were there and they turned it in. Now I gotta go into
Well, remember though, our attendance policy is not based on ARA, academic related activity. Our attendance policy is based upon attendance. So even if they do it, and even if they do it for that date, that does not necessarily mean that every instructor is going to do one of these cats every class meeting. That's why attendance still needs to be put in. But that's a good point. I mean, our online division is built around ARA. The students log in, they do work, it's counted as attendance. Our campus-based courses don't work that way. But it's a good observation. Okay. So, so just for consideration, our first term courses, and again, I want you guys to reflect on your own practice here. As part of curriculum realignment, Jillian mentioned the standardized nature of these courses. Right now, in the 4 realigned courses, the COM 104 students get 13 feedback opportunities formalized in the course over a 15-week semester. Keep in mind, this is independent of what the instructor may do in addition with the 10%. Okay? INFT, they get 13. Math, they have 15. And English, because we're crazy and insane, and I'm looking at both Deb and I because we're the ones that built it, they're getting 19 feedback opportunities over the course of a 15-week semester. Now, what that means, first of all, for our students in these first-term courses, they're getting 60 instances over the 15 weeks where they're getting some level of feedback. What that averages to among the 4 courses is 15 times. Our semesters are how long? 15 weeks. So what that means is, on average, they're getting 1 piece of feedback each class meeting. And keep in mind, to Jillian's point, this doesn't take into consideration the 10%, where they may get even more frequent feedback, however we choose to use our 10%. So again, reflecting your current practice, think about your classes this term. And I know it's tough, you may not have your syllabus in front of you, but I want you guys to guesstimate how many times you give students written feedback over the course of the current semester. Don't think next semester, think right now. How many times have you given feedback to your students over the 15 weeks? Write the number down. I'm not going to hold you accountable to it. I'm not going to make you say it out loud. But just write it down. The only person I'm going to ask is Paul. You sit towards the front of the room. And
So can you count that?
Oh. The old man in the back of the room.
We gotta have here.
Hey, just a minute. We're getting nasty here.
Only with
I think we'd have to discipline faculty for bullying each other during the training. Jeez.
Why, you heard it.
I'm gonna be the same.
I'm the judicial officer here, I gotta hold this to code of conduct.
Yes. Well, at least nobody's brought out their phones anyway.
Okay, so let's transition away from assessment. You guys wrote down your number. I'm not gonna make you guys speak it out loud, but reflect. How close is that number to the average that's in the current CLP courses of 15 times for each one of those courses? And keep in mind, that's on the low end. Again, for some of us, I'm looking at Alex. Alex does what she does with her 10%. Deb, Jillian. I'm assuming that you guys are probably somewhere in the 20s.
Oh. Yeah,
More?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, I'm not going to make it say it. But again, keep this in mind, that as our students are transitioning out of these first term courses and they get into second term, they've been accustomed to getting this constant feedback in these first term courses. And when they're getting to you folks on the program side, because that's the majority of the second term experience at this point, when they're getting to you folks in the program area, they've been conditioned to expect out of the first term the same level of support and the same level of feedback. So it's really important for us to think through.
Chris, I got a quick question.
Sure.
Now, what I've done when you talk about that 90, 80, 70, 60, as far as our level of class increases 100, 200, 300, I've done the same with feedback. Because with my 100 level classes, I'm giving written feedback, I just looked here like 18 to 20 times.
Yeah.
Whereas when I used to teach 300 level classes, it might have been 8 to 10.
That's fine.
Yeah.
That totally buys in from a, you know, back to Rick's point about quantifying this stuff. We may not always be able to quantify it as precisely as you just did, but I think to your point, you're kind of sort of getting there. I mean, that 8 to 9 times in a 300 level baccalaureate course is moving towards that 60 to 70%. I mean, I don't want you guys to break that. I mean, we can oversimplify this by saying, well, if you're teaching a first term course, students should get 20 pieces of feedback. If they're taking a 100 level second term course, it should be 16. And if it's a 300 level course, then it should be 8. I mean, we could quantify it that way, but I don't want to insult you guys as professionals. And quite frankly, I don't want to minimize this and then all of a sudden have people shoot for numbers rather than shoot for it really being meaningful. And that's why the college does not want to go there at all. To really boil it down to numbers. Let's transition from assessment into our teaching methodologies themselves. Modeling is going to be important for us at every level of instruction. Even going forward, Rick and I were looking at some of the models for blended, whether it's virtual instruction, face-to-face instruction. These are some things that where our modeling, showing students what they need to do before they need to do it, that's never going to go away from how we operate. We may do it in different modalities going forward. Video, recordings, other asynchronous and synchronous ways of doing it, but that's never going to go away. But the idea is that as the students start to move up and progress, they're functioning more independently at each one of the levels. Also, we increase the level of blooms. I'm going to give you an example of this. We had our New York State call yesterday, and Maureen Schichtel, who is our physical therapist assistant program director, showed the entire state this document that she created, where she created columns, according to Bloom's, of knowledge, comprehension, application, synthesis, evaluation, and analysis. And what she's now doing is she's evaluating her major assessments, exams. I have 3 questions that are analytical, and I've got 4 questions that are evaluative, and I've got 2 questions that are synthesis level. And what she shows is how she's trying to quantify the instructor level of support on the assessments based upon the levels of rigor, the levels of Bloom's. Similarly with your teaching methodologies, go back and think about your lesson plans. How often during the class do I ask them to just show me that they know something? How often do I ask them to show me that they understand it by applying it? How often do I ask them to take prior class meetings and show connections between things we have talked about? As they're moving up, we should be hammering harder on the analysis, synthesis, and evaluation levels of Bloom's and less on the knowledge, comprehension, and application levels. Rick?
One thing that is dangerous there, and we got to be careful, is that some teachers interpret Bloom's, and then maybe more so now, well, let's say, well, at 100, I'm only going to stick to the bottom levels of Bloom's. Yeah. That's wrong. I mean, the analogy I always give is you don't teach a toddler or preschooler to be a critical thinker by waiting until they're 15 to give them choices. You may give them fewer choices, like you may say, would you rather wear the red sweater or the blue sweater? But you got to teach critical thinking from the beginning. So it's the same thing. The balance might be as you get to 300 and 400 to do almost exclusively at the top levels of Bloom's, analysis, synthesis, and evaluation. But that's got to be; those have got to be included. And what I see when I look at tests is there's too many times where, especially in the medical field, where the tests are totally factual. Whereas occasionally in the class they're using case studies. Yep. They're good, but then they don't test them on that. Yep. So that's another thing, to test on the skills that you're teaching during the course.
Yes. And so to elaborate on it a little bit, again, and we're really focusing here on that column of instructor does. We're focusing here a little bit less on students do. This is more instructor does at this point. But think about what you are going to do class meeting to class meeting. Where will you lecture or where will you model? You know, Rick and I had this conversation today that the lecture has been demonized. It has its place. There are certain lessons that initially, to a certain extent, a lecture is absolutely fundamentally necessary. And you can't get away from it. But also, our methodology should be mixed in such a way where we are having the students work on it through guided practice. Again, like Manzoor said, instances where he throws the problem up on the board. He kind of does it for them to see the first time through, then puts the next equation on the board, and then you guys tell me, what is this step, what is this step, what is this step? You're still guiding them, but they're a part of the decision-making process. And then maybe the next example is where the students are working on another problem of similar caliber, and they're pairing up with somebody. And then the last step of the teaching cycle for you, that class meeting, last 15 minutes might be, the students work on that question independently, where you're circulating and then helping the students out. This discussion right now can go under that instructor does column. This is what you're doing. This is how you're outlining what the students should expect from you as you're moving into each one of those class meetings. Does it make sense to you folks? Mm-hmm. Okay, so reflect for a moment. When do you currently model in your classes using any of the strategies included above? Take a few minutes, just jot down some quick thoughts. What you're jotting down right now for your class could be included in your instructor does, and it may also be students do. Let's go back to Manzur's example. I am going to model questions. The students are going to practice them through guided practice. The students are going to work in pairs on a series of questions, and the students are going to work on those questions independently while I circulate and provide feedback and support. You're balancing both extremes. Take a few minutes, jot some thoughts down. Think about your current practice. It's okay. Yeah.
So I know get to your, why was this or guided practice?
It was at the first ones.
Right, and I think his point is that we don't necessarily.
But the other thing also is
Right.
asking the whole year of start call. When we mentioned that we were putting this thing together, the state teams were asking if it's recorded. We have access to it. Well, you know what?
So you might.
But then again,
Then anything else.
And then have,
Yeah.
what's we don't know yet what the agenda is for it.
Okay, so then you do the lecture modeling and the guided practice.
Right.
Okay. This is what I'll do.
Well, what we do is, honestly, if you could do this, we would have the
No.
training.
No.
We could, but if we
Yes.
They could be facilitated.
we could.
Yeah, you want.
Train the trainers, right?
Yeah.
They want them, problem solving, thinking through this.
Right.
Understanding this, and then solving the problem.
About 1 more minute, folks. This is it, and then the rest of it is just a real quick blow by blow.
Okay.
And then at that point, they're going to work for the rest of.
Just remove that one night. We'll wait till we're done with this. And then, by the way, it's about 80% now, it's gone up. Is that better? It's not gonna be 90%.
No, because you're, in all seriousness, because you guys are professionals.
Right, exactly.
Trained educators.
Right, because we're talking about 90 in 100 level classes,
Yeah.
well, it can't be 90 in us.
Not all of you.
Even. Well put, okay.
All right, Alex, I'm going to pick on you for a second. What are you thinking?
So just like Jillian, I was thinking about the creative problem solving process.
Yeah.
Assignment for COM 104 because it's very intense and it involves a lot. It's very taxing for the students.
Mhm.
So I thought this would be a good one to use that four-part process, and I think it fits in really well. It's similar to what I was already doing, but I like how this really helped me identify each step a little bit more clearly.
Yep.
So I would start by actually doing the process myself. So I would select an example and I would literally walk through the whole thing from start to finish. I would even have it on the screen. I would type in the responses so they can see how it takes shape.
Yep.
They could ask questions along the way.
Yep.
So it would be more interactive.
Yep.
Then for the second part, I would have the students maybe come up with a scenario that we would then go through together. So I would, in a sense, be their recorder. They would tell me what to write, and I would kind of correct them along the way.
Yep.
And then for the third one, I would have them work in small groups, again, with their own scenarios. And then they could try it on their own, but then I'm there to support them. They would support each other.
Yep.
And then finally, they could start working on the actual assessment,
Yep.
which is groups anyway.
Yep.
But then I'd be able to facilitate all the groups.
Very well said. And this is going to be oversimplification, and Rick will probably yell at me for saying this. But let's say that I'm teaching a second level course, 200 level course at 8. Let's go on the high end. Let's go 80%. My 80% could be these 4 areas, and I don't want to say these are the only 4 ways of teaching. They're not. There's far more than that. But let's just oversimplify this for a second. At 80%, what that might mean is that I'm lecturing or modeling maybe at 20 or 30% of that class meeting. The students are doing guided practice at maybe the 10 to 20% level. So I'm worried about 40 or 50%. And then that 40 to 50% that's left over is somewhere divided between these last 2 activities. Again, I don't want to oversimplify this because I don't want to get into quantifying this and saying, and everybody's going to say, well, I got to do it this way. But to Alex's point, that's a really good way of breaking this down into smaller chunks.
Yeah.
Chunking down not only our assessments, but chunking down our lessons.
Right. And this helps you to then think about the other percentages and instructor involvement because you can just reallocate.
Absolutely. Well said.
I found this really helpful.
Great. Deb?
I am thinking about teaching COM 104 this semester for the first time. The creative problem solving assessment is a difficult one, I think, because of the problem solving process itself, let alone that we want them all to collaborate using OneDrive.
Using the technology.
Using the technology. And so it's really got 2 pieces in there. So if we can figure out ways to chunk it down, and that's what I ended up doing was let's focus first on creative problem solving. Then let's focus on how do we collaborate on a document, and now let's put the 2 together.
Well said.
Because they're just all over the place.
And I'm thinking, Barb, with graphic design, there's so much of what you guys do that's technique driven. And often within those techniques, they may be great artists coming into your class, but they're not, in a sense, formally trained yet. And in many respects, that's what you're doing.
Right. We do thumbnails. I demonstrate, lecture on a process. They do thumbnails, rocks, slowly building. They have to explain to each other as well as to the whole class. So they'll pair up and share with everyone like a critique. Then they'll go back, take ideas, and rework the project, and it's a process. So a big project will take 5 weeks to create something, and in the meantime they're doing mini projects to learn more about what they're doing to scaffold it to create the final project.
Absolutely. And keep this in mind, folks, as we transition from the tracking calendar over to the supplemental itself. While a lot of what we've done for the last hour or so has been really focused more on the tracking calendar, once you fill out that tracking calendar, your methodologies do spill back into that instructor's approach to the course. And this is stuff that once you fill out that tracking calendar, again, that's why I've started there, because it's probably the most labor-intensive part of what we're going to have to do going forward. Once you have it there, it makes the supplemental itself far easier, because your methodology has already been articulated and already expressed. It's a matter of just pulling it over and putting it into the methodology itself. Okay, so let's talk about the supplemental itself. First of all, the content, and from a writing standpoint, what we're expecting, first of all, is that your language in the supplemental shifts from being contract-type language, thou shalt and thou shalt not. If thou shalt, this is the consequence. If thou shalt not, this is the consequence. We want to shift from that kind of mentality into one that is student-centered. A lot of the research right now, it's being published all over the place in the Chronicle of Higher Ed. Rick and I think, usually see articles once every month or so on this, if not more frequently. Talks about shifting the content and the idea of a supplemental or of a syllabus away from contract and towards a student success document. So when you start working through your supplemental for next semester, shift away from thinking, well, according to line 4, paragraph 2, this is the consequence, or this is what you get out of what you've done. Shift instead into what do I fundamentally need to say to a student on day 1 that's going to help them to understand what they need to be successful in the course? That's the language we're looking for. We're looking for positivity. We're looking for language that's student-centered. We're looking for language that's not filled with a lot of academic jargon. We're looking for supplementals that are very straightforward and understandable to our students as success documents. We also took out a lot of information that was there that was repetitive either from the system curriculum or that's found in the catalog. And I'll show you some examples of that in a couple seconds. We want to put in, and this is really the only things that are being added into the document, the principles of CLP and the work-related goals, and we've already talked about the tracking calendar as a map to help the students be successful. So here are the revisions. First of all, we want to make sure that you are separating what's called skills assistance from student support services. All of you as faculty members, all of us are required to have SSS time. For those of us who are part-timers, that's on our contracts. We're required to put in an hour's worth of SSS time for 3 hours of instruction. Skills assistance are additional time that we make ourselves available to our students to provide assistance. For the full-timers in the room, that's something that's built into your contracts. For the adjuncts in the room, this is stuff where you're able to, because you're on campus, provide students with additional assistance. So we are asking you to separate those two. The hour required, which is SSS, to skills assistance, which is when you're also available. Tied to that with the part-timers, you're wondering what should and what shouldn't be there, and I'm not going to throw the deans under the bus, but I'm going to. Ask them relative to skills assistance. That's an area of the instructor's responsibility that I'm not 100% familiar with. They would be, and they'll be able to tell you exactly what those expectations are. But you are required for that 1 hour of SSS time. Also,
yeah. Isn't there something about a reference to the learning center in the skills assistance? I think that's correct.
That is if they need the additional, if it's not available on campus.
No, I'm talking about the learning centers on each campus.
Sorry, what?
For skills assistance, there's also the learning centers.
Correct.
And I think it's recommended actually.
Yeah, I think it's more of a recommendation versus a requirement because different campuses have different levels of academic centers.
What's the difference between skills assistance and the SSS? Because they both say students who request help from the instructor.
Yes. So for you guys, for the part-timers, SSS time is in your contracts. That basically constitutes, and Dean's helped me on this, that's your office hours. The skills assistance is basically additional time that you make yourself available. That's how I've always thought of it.
So it's kind of like, isn't SSS your regular, like I'm always there from 2 to 3?
That I'm required to be, yes.
If you, like by appointment would be.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
That's exactly how I would phrase it.
Yeah.
Your SSS time, you have a designated
You're always
location,
there.
time,
Yep.
day, this is when I can meet with you.
Yeah.
If you need anything beyond this,
Yeah.
if you need a skills assistance beyond this,
Yeah.
we can be by appointment, or I'm on campus these days and times. The skills assistance kind of is above.
I'll meet you at a certain time.
Yep.
Exactly.
Yep.
Convenient for both.
Yeah, which could be by appointment or whatever else it might be. Recommended media resources. If your textbooks, you have to put the title, the author, ISBN number. You do need to add in a career life prep statement and a professionalism statement when the materials, the new template was sent out to you. Not only did you receive the template, but you also receive sample professionalism statements and sample CLP statements. You're not required to use both of those, but they're there that you could potentially use as boilerplate, starting places, all of that. But we want to make sure that the college's new branding is something that's infused into the system, supplemental syllabus, tracking calendar, because it really is how we're operating now as a college. And the description of all the graded course elements, percentages, and all of that as well. Additional updates. The program outcomes are going to be linked. The attendance policy should be something where you refer to the students to the catalog. Academic dishonesty policy, you refer them to the catalog. Americans with Disabilities Act, you refer them to the catalog. The college grade designation chart, you refer them to the catalog. The reason why we're doing this with these items is because policy and procedure do change. And what we found were instances where people put stuff into the supplemental that contradicted college policy. We don't want to make you guys obligated to change your supplemental every time that we change policy, because sometimes we get well notified, other times not so much. So this way, we don't have to worry about you guys being out of compliance with this. Very easy way to be able to solve this. And be aware that if you are in the faculty room and you see medical assistant or physical therapist assistant instructors still using the old template, It's because according to their accreditation, they can't change their design at this point. Because they've been screened, they've been evaluated by our accreditors, and if we change them, we run the risk of having issues with our accreditation. We don't want that. So if you happen to see it, don't feel that you are being isolated or you're being blamed or whatever else it might be. It's just simply this is a procedural matter that we have to go through from a college standpoint. Okay? And again, this is a sample CLP statement that you can put into the syllabus. The whole idea is to show the students how Path, Pro, Plus, and Team are being used to support their time here at the college. And the professionalism statement, it goes beyond classroom etiquette. We had a pretty heavy debate about this on Systems FDC. Some people felt the etiquette statement was correct. Others felt that it was too elementary. Where we arrived at was a perspective that we're a career college. And in the career world, we don't tell people about workplace etiquette. Instead, we talk about their level of professionalism. When you write your requirements in your syllabus for professionalism for spring, you want to avoid using language that sounds like classroom etiquette. You want to instead shift to language that sounds more like professionalism. Their professional demeanor, their communication, how they respect their fellow classmates and the instructor, treating classmates like they would colleagues in a workplace, openness to the ideas of others, active listening, participation. These are some examples. But we want to put it in the workplace type language. We want to get away from etiquette type rules. That's it as far as the overview is concerned. And keep this in mind. This is all about making sure that you guys have a good sense of what the expectations are going to be going forward. Ideally, we're all taking what's been talked about today and we're going full throttle with every single element of the supplemental and the tracking calendar for spring 2017. There have been a lot of discussions among the deans over the course of the last week or so. Here is what's required of faculty for spring 2017. We are required to flip our supplemental syllabi for spring 2017. We are required to put in all the elements that we've talked about with the supplemental. With the tracking calendar, we are required to have our weeks. We are required to have our outcomes. We are required to list our assignments, and we're required to list the due dates. The two new columns that have been added, we are asking faculty to fill out those two columns to the best of their abilities, with the understanding that either A, they can be very sketchy at this point because maybe this is a new way for us to think about our classrooms, and we may want to use the spring to basically keep a log of how we do what we do to build a really complete, tight syllabus for fall 2017. On the far extreme is where we do not fill in the instructor does and the students do column for spring 2017. We leave those two columns blank with the intention that we write down what we are doing. We keep a log, class meeting to class meeting to class meeting, in preparation for putting together a tight supplemental syllabus for fall 2017. There have been discussions with several faculty, Paul Barr, myself, Adiem, Juan, Jim if he was in town. So this is the expectation for fall. Elena Cerisi, from a full-time perspective, is aware of this. We had a conversation with her. At this point, she feels that that is a fair compromise versus flipping the entire document at this point. What I'm asking of you guys is to flip as much of it as you can. But if you're going to need to give yourself some time to think through this, you'll have the opportunity in the spring with the expectation that your fall syllabi are going to be flawless.
Do we still have flexibility to put in maybe a class rollover day, just because different classes might progress in different directions?
Yeah, you can do that. I mean, I do that myself because I always have a tendency of falling behind. I planned today for 45 minutes of talking at you and 45 minutes of doing. Clearly I failed. So that does happen. And if that's something that you're going to need to do in order to be able to really set yourself up and make sure you've got that wiggle room, then that's totally understandable. Okay. As long as we don't see where out of 30 class meetings, 12 of them are set up that way. Say that one more time? They were sent to you via email. They were also included today. I resent the invite for today. And I attached both the directions as well as the supplemental syllabus and the tracking calendar template as 2 separate files. So you actually have had them sent to you now twice, once via email, once in the meeting request. Luke?
Can you show that slide with the changes that are required?
Sure.
Yes, okay, thank you.
Yep. Okay, folks, for those of you online, thank you for attending. We appreciate it. I do have a note that you guys were here. For those of you guys in person, thank you for being so participatory and engaged, and see you soon.
Bye now.
Thanks.
All right, thank you.
Thanks, Manzer. Usually got to come back up in a second.